there, listeners. You sent over some really interesting research about cues, this stuff from a behavioral investigator named Vanessa Van Edwards. And it's all about how warmth and competence, those things, can actually lead to success.
What's fascinating is that Van Edwards argues that, smart people
Mm.
don't always translate their intelligence into people's smarts.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've met some brilliant people who just can't seem to connect with others. There's this missing piece.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really where Van Edwards' research comes in, right? Her work, which involved studying like a crazy 58,000 working hours across 11 companies, shows that, low performers actually have a negative impact on their colleagues.
Really?
But conversely, high performers create this positive ripple effect.
So it's not just about you, it's how you impact everyone around you.
It is, yeah. And Van Edwards really suggests that a lot of this comes down to the cues that we're sending out, right?
Okay, so let's dive into this research. We've got excerpts from her book, Cues, and a recent interview where she really breaks things down.
Mm-hmm.
What really struck me is she's claiming 82% of our impressions are based on just two things, warmth and competence.
Yeah. It is just incredible to think that something as subtle as a hand gesture or a tone of voice can have such huge impact on how people perceive us.
So are you saying that if I learn to project warmth and competence,
Yes.
then I can actually influence how people see me? That almost feels like a superpower.
It kind of is. And what's even more empowering is that Van Edwards says charisma isn't like some magical quality you're born with.
Right.
It's something that you can learn and develop over time.
Hold on. Are you telling me I can train myself to be more charismatic? That changes everything.
It's true. Think about it. Like Van Edwards herself, she started out feeling super awkward in social situations. She used to believe that charisma was something you were either born with or you weren't, and that's it. But that's not true.
So how does she go from awkward to charismatic?
By studying the science of cues, she basically became a people watcher.
Interesting.
Analyzing how the most charismatic individuals communicated both verbally and non-verbally.
Yeah.
And then she started experimenting with those techniques herself.
It's like she cracked the code.
Yeah.
No, it reminds me of that study she talks about, the Wall Street game. I was blown away by that.
I know. That study was such a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
Remember, they had these two groups play the exact same game.
Right.
But one group was told it was called the Wall Street game.
Yeah.
And the other group was told it was called the community game.
And just the name of the game changed how people played.
That's right. The players who thought they were playing the Wall Street game were far more competitive.
Wow.
And less cooperative.
That is wild. It just shows you the power of words to shape our perceptions.
It really does, yeah.
And influence our behavior.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Speaking of perceptions, let's talk about resting bothered face.
Oh, yeah.
Something that I know a lot of people can relate to.
I know. Tell me about it. I have a friend who, she's constantly being told to smile even when she's content,
Right.
But it's just her face.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because some people's neutral expressions just naturally come across as more serious or even negative.
Yeah.
Leading to unfair judgments and misinterpretations. Yeah.
It must be so exhausting to constantly have people telling you to lighten up.
I know.
Thinking about all these subtle cues, it makes me wonder how many times I've completely misread someone.
Oh, why?
Without even realizing it. It's a little mind-boggling.
It's like we're all walking around sending and receiving these signals.
Yeah.
But we're completely unaware of the language that we're speaking.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. Van Edwards has identified 97 specific cues
97.
that can impact how we're perceived.
I'm feeling overwhelmed.
It's not as complicated as it sounds, though.
Oh, okay.
These cues are like ingredients in a recipe, so you don't need to use all of them at once, right?
Right.
The key is to choose the cues that align with your natural strengths and personality.
Okay.
And combine them in a way that feels authentic to you.
So I don't need to try to be someone I'm not?
It's
understanding my own blend and then amplifying it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where Van Edwards' conversation formula comes in.
Mm-hmm.
It's designed to help people connect more genuinely and avoid those awkward silences that can just derail a conversation. I know I used to struggle with that.
Me too. Especially in college. I always felt like I was saying the wrong thing, or there were just these long, uncomfortable pauses.
I know. Did you ever feel like you were overthinking things?
Yeah.
Like trying to come across as smart or witty,
Yes.
and it just totally
I hear it
backfired.
all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
But Van Edwards has this really interesting concept that she calls aggressive liking.
Wait, aggressive liking.
I know, it sounds a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it's about shifting our focus from trying to impress others to genuinely liking them.
Okay, wait a minute. Aggressive liking.
Mm.
Are we talking about being fake? Because that's not my style.
No, not at all. It's about approaching interactions with a mindset of like genuine curiosity and appreciation. It's about finding something you genuinely like about the other person,
Oh, okay.
even if it's just something really small,
Okay.
and letting that guide the conversation.
I like that. It's like shifting from how can I make this person like me to what do I genuinely find interesting about this person?
That's it. And when we approach interactions with that kind of openness and curiosity, it makes us more relaxed, more engaging, and ultimately more likable.
So it's a win-win.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about those magic phrases that Van Edwards recommends. These are little snippets of language that can instantly boost our likability.
They are. They're little shortcuts,
They're
basically.
right.
And they work by triggering this positive response in the other person,
Yeah.
making them feel seen, heard, and appreciated.
Okay, so give me an example. What's one of these magic phrases?
All right, imagine you're talking to someone and you say, I was just thinking of you. Like, it immediately creates a sense of closeness and shows that you've been thinking about them.
I love that. It's so simple, but so effective. Okay, what's another magic phrase?
Try this one. You're always so, and then fill in the blank with a positive quality.
Oh,
You genuinely admire in that person, like maybe helpful or insightful.
I see. So you're highlighting something you actually appreciate about them.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah. And for the last magic phrase, try this one. I'm so glad
I'm so glad.
Yeah. And this one is all about acknowledging the shared experience that you have with the other person,
Oh, I see.
whether it's, a meeting or a conversation or even just a chance encounter.
So it could be as simple as, I'm so glad we met, or I'm so glad we had this conversation.
Exactly.
That you're validating the connection.
Yeah, you're leaving them with a positive feeling, right?
Yeah.
These phrases may seem small, but they can make a big difference.
This is making me think about different levels of intimacy
Huh?
in relationships. Van Edwards talks about how we connect with people on different levels, right?
She does. She breaks it down into like 3 main levels.
Yeah.
General traits,
Okay.
personal concerns,
Okay.
and the self-narrative level.
Okay, break it down for me. What does that mean?
So the first level, general traits, that's the surface level.
Okay.
It's where we get to know like someone's basic personality
Oh, okay.
and interests,
Huh.
like, oh, you like to hike. Me too.
Yeah.
It's that starting point, right?
Right.
For building rapport.
Yeah.
Then we move to the personal concerns level.
Okay.
This is where we start to share our hopes, our fears, our dreams.
It's getting a little deeper.
It is. It's getting a little more vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And this level of sharing builds trust
Yeah.
and connection. But the most intriguing level, to me anyway, is the self-narrative level.
Okay, tell me more about the self-narrative level. I'm intrigued.
So this is the deepest level of intimacy.
Okay.
Where we share like the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Wow.
It's about understanding someone's core beliefs, values, and how they see the world, right?
It's not just what we say or do, but the narrative that shapes everything.
It is, exactly. And this reminds me of this fascinating study that Van Edwards mentions
Oh.
about people who consider themselves lucky versus unlucky.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that study.
They found that people who believed they were lucky actually noticed more opportunities.
Wait, so their self-perception shaped their reality?
It seemed that way, yeah.
Ah.
It's like this powerful illustration
Okay.
of how the stories we tell ourselves, can have this really profound impact.
That's blowing my mind a little bit. Makes me wonder if the stories I tell myself are actually limiting my potential. Maybe I need to rewrite my own narrative.
That's a powerful insight. And that's the beauty of understanding these cues and these different levels of intimacy, right? We start to see ourselves
Yeah.
and our interactions in a whole new light.
This has been so insightful already. I feel like I'm starting to see the world through a new lens. But before we go too deep, let's talk about body language, specifically hand gestures. I remember reading that the most viral TED speakers use hundreds of hand gestures in their talks.
Yeah, they do.
It's like their hands are speaking.
It's true, and it's powerful.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some hand gestures I can use to boost, my likability and project confidence?
So one of the simplest but most effective cues is to just flash your palm.
Oh.
Like early on,
Oh, flashing your palm signal.
openness and
Open.
trustworthiness.
Interesting.
It's like saying, hey, I've got nothing to hide.
Oh, okay. I'll have to try that. What else?
Another powerful gesture is the steeple.
Steeple.
Yeah, where you bring your fingertips together
Oh, yeah.
to form a little roof, right? Like
Yeah.
a power pose for your hands.
Oh, like, yeah, I've seen that one. It's like a power pose for your hands.
That conveys competence and authority,
Mm.
especially when used, like at key moments,
Okay.
Like if you're making an important point.
So steeple for confidence, palm flash for openness. Got it. Are there any other hand gestures that can, like, help me win people over?
Well, there's one more that's really interesting. It's called the lower lid flex.
The what?
The lower lid flex. Have you ever noticed people doing that?
Right. Flexing their lower eyelids?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
It's subtle, but it can be a real tell. It usually indicates focus,
Okay.
but it can also be a sign of skepticism or confusion.
Oh, so if someone is subtly flexing their lower eyelids while I'm talking, it could mean they're not fully buying it.
Yeah, exactly. A possibility, right?
It's like a secret window into their thoughts.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about hand gestures. What about vocal cues? How does our voice impact how people see us?
Our voice is so powerful, right?
Yeah.
It conveys confidence, authority, warmth,
Yeah.
and even reveals our emotional state. One thing to watch out for is the question inflection.
Question inflection. What's that?
It's when we accidentally go up at the end of our sentences,
Oh, yeah.
making statements sound like questions.
Oh, I do that all the time, especially when I'm nervous.
It's a common habit,
Yeah.
but it undermines our authority and makes us sound less confident.
So downward inflection for conviction.
Yes.
Upward inflection for uncertainty.
Yeah, basically.
Got it. What about someone like President Obama, who's known for his commanding speaking style?
He uses a lot of downward inflection,
Oh, okay.
but he also uses a lot of space in the bottom of his mouth, which gives his voice more resonance
Wow.
and makes him sound more believable.
So it's like all these vocal cues are working together to create this sense of, like, authority.
They are, yeah.
I wonder if I could learn to do that.
You can. It's just all about practice
Yeah.
and awareness.
Okay, speaking of communication, I remember reading that Van Edwards cautions against interrupting people,
Yeah.
even when we think we understand their point. She had that funny story about someone interrupting her to correct her about oxytocin,
I love that story.
but it turns out they had completely misunderstood.
Oh, it's such a good reminder, right?
Yeah.
That even when we think we're being helpful, interrupting can totally derail the conversation and create all these misunderstandings.
It's about being a good listener, and
Yeah.
respecting the other person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of respecting others, Van Edwards brings up a really interesting point about headphones.
What, like AirPods?
Yeah.
Okay.
She suggests that this constant use of headphones, especially AirPods, is actually reducing opportunities for, like, spontaneous connection.
Oh, I've definitely noticed that. It's like everyone's plugged into their own little world,
Yeah.
and it makes it harder to strike up those casual conversations.
Totally. Yeah.
It's like, are we sacrificing those real-world connections for the digital bubbles?
It's a question we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, it is.
All this talk about cues and communication is making me think about lie detection. It's a topic that fascinates everyone, right?
I'm dying to know, are there any cues that can help us spot a liar?
Well, it's not as simple as Hollywood makes it seem.
Okay.
But there are these micro expressions that can give us some clues.
What are microexpressions?
So they're fleeting facial expressions
Okay.
that reveal our true emotions, even when we're trying to conceal them.
So even if someone is trying to maintain a poker face,
Yeah.
their microexpressions might betray them.
It's possible. And one surprising cue that Van Edwards mentions is subtle expressions of disgust.
Disgust. Why would a liar show disgust?
It's often directed at themselves.
Oh.
They might sniff or wrinkle their nose slightly as if they're disgusted by their own dishonesty.
Oh, wow. It's like their body's betraying their words.
It is, and it's another example of how our nonverbal cues can just speak volumes.
This is fascinating stuff.
It is.
I'm starting to feel like a human lie detector.
Right. But the goal isn't to become, like, paranoid or overly analytical.
Okay.
It's simply to become more attuned to those subtle signals that people are sending through their body language.
Right.
It can help us understand them better and build more authentic connections.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, one thing I've always struggled with is starting conversations with strangers.
Oh, I know, me too.
It can be so nerve-wracking, especially if you're naturally, like, introverted or shy.
Yeah?
Does Van Edwards have any tips for breaking the ice without feeling awkward?
She does. And her advice is, like, surprisingly simple.
Okay.
Be authentic.
I know, I know. Be yourself, be
Yeah.
genuine, but how do you actually do that?
Right. It
Yeah.
starts with identifying your strengths.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Are you a good listener?
Yeah.
Are you a great storyteller?
Yeah.
Do you have a knack for, like, making people feel comfortable?
Okay, so it's about, like, playing to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Van Edwards gives this great example of President Truman, right? He wasn't like this naturally charismatic speaker, but he won the DNC by focusing on one-on-one conversations
Okay.
where he could connect with people on a personal level.
So it's not about using those, like, canned pickup lines or trying to be the life of the party.
No,
It's about finding your unique way to connect,
that's it.
whether it's through humor or shared interests.
Yeah. And when we're authentic, it takes the pressure off and allows us to, like, relax and enjoy the interaction,
Right.
which in turn makes us more approachable and engaging.
You know, all this talk about connection is making me think about friendships.
Oh, yeah.
Building friendships as adults can be so challenging.
It's true. It's not like when you're a kid.
It's not as easy as it was when we were kids, but Van Edwards has this brilliant suggestion.
Oh, I love this one.
Okay.
It's friendship dates.
Friendship dates.
I know.
What does that even mean?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's scheduling time to connect with, like, potential friends. Just like we would schedule dates with, you know,
Romantic interests.
romantic interests. Yeah.
Okay, that's such a good idea. It makes the whole thing less awkward.
It does. It makes it more intentional.
And fun.
And fun. Exactly.
How do we plan a friendship date? Do we just go for coffee or drinks?
It can be as simple as that, but Van Edwards recommends choosing activities that you genuinely enjoy
Okay.
and using, like, those same engaging questions that,
Yeah.
would work for dating.
So instead of just meeting for coffee, we might suggest going to a museum or trying something new together.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about creating shared experiences that allow us to bond and build rapport in a more, like, organic way.
Right, right.
And while you're on those friendship dates, remember all those cues we've been discussing.
Right, like pay attention, ask
Yeah.
thoughtful questions.
Yeah.
It's like we're armed with a whole new set of tools for navigating our social world.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered warmth and confidence cues, the power of words, hand gestures, eye contact, vocal cues, lie detection, starting conversations, and even friendship dates. Wow.
That is a lot.
It is a lot. But the key takeaway is that all of these skills can be learned and practiced.
They can, yeah. And with a little effort
Right.
and awareness, we can become more effective communicators.
Yes.
And build more meaningful relationships.
And maybe even unlock a little more success
Right.
along the way.
Absolutely.
Well said. This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm already starting to see the world in a whole new light.
That's what's so exciting about this, right?
Yeah.
There's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's take a moment to digest all of this incredible information.
That's a great idea. It's a lot to process.
It's kind of overwhelming, to think about how many cues we're sending and receiving all the time without even, like, realizing it. It makes you wonder what happens when you, like, miss those cues.
Totally.
Or misinterpret them.
Yeah. It's like missing this crucial line in a conversation,
Yeah.
We end up feeling disconnected, misunderstood, maybe even frustrated.
And it makes me think about how our world is changing. We're spending more time online, plugged into devices, less time face to face. Are we losing some of those micro moments of connection that Van Edwards talks about?
That's such a good question. And it's something, we need to be really mindful of.
Yeah.
Those, like, seemingly insignificant interactions, those quick smiles,
Right.
shared glances, they all contribute to our overall sense of well-being and belonging.
So it's not just about being polite. It's actually about fostering a sense of community
It is, yeah.
and connection.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why Van Edwards emphasizes personal branding so much, especially online.
Okay, tell me more about that. How do cues play into personal branding?
Well, think about it. Even online, we're constantly sending out cues through our photos, videos, our social media posts. And these cues, whether we're conscious of them or not, are shaping people's perceptions of us.
So it's not just what you say, but like the overall image.
It's a whole package, yeah.
Okay.
And Van Edwards gives this like great example in her book.
Oh?
She had a friend who was like a super successful, intelligent woman,
Okay.
but she was having trouble like finding a partner.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What was going on?
Well, her friend's uh, Instagram was full of photos of her like partying with friends,
Uh-huh.
holding cocktails.
So she was projecting an image that wasn't aligning with her goals.
Exactly. She was inadvertently attracting men who were looking for like a party girl, not a long-term partner.
Oh, so what did she do?
She revamped her Instagram. She started posting photos that like reflected her true interests,
Mm-hmm.
hiking, biking, spending time with her dog,
Cozy weekends at home?
Exactly.
Okay, and it worked.
It did. She started attracting men who were looking for the same things that she was.
So instead of being someone she wasn't, she just started showcasing like her authentic self.
Exactly.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah. Like she was finally speaking the right language.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that like we have control over the cues we send out. Yeah. Right? It's about being intentional with our personal brand and making sure it reflects who we are
Okay.
and what we want to attract.
That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of like awkward situations, let's talk about greetings. I'm always so unsure.
Oh my God, you did.
Whether to go for a hug or a handshake, it can be so awkward.
I know.
Does Van Edwards have any advice on that?
She does. She says it's all about like signaling your intentions early on.
Okay, so how do we do that?
So if we want a handshake, we should extend our hand from a distance,
Okay.
make eye contact, and say something like, "So good to see you."
Yeah. So it's about like creating a clear path for the other person.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
No more awkward hovering
Yeah.
or hesitant handshakes.
I love it.
Right. And if we want a hug, we should open our arms wide
Okay.
as we approach, leaving no room for ambiguity.
So it's about being clear and direct.
Yes, right. But speaking of hugs, I have given and received some pretty awkward hugs in my day. Are there tips for mastering, like, the art of the hug?
I mean, I've definitely been there.
Yeah, Van Edwards, she talks about the importance of, like, symmetry and equal pressure.
So no one-armed hugs.
No unarmed hugs, no awkward back pats.
Okay.
And no lingering too long
Right.
or squeezing too tight. Right. It's about finding that sweet spot of warmth and connection without making the other person feel uncomfortable.
I've also heard that you shouldn't tap someone on the back during a hug.
No, don't do that.
Okay.
It can be seen as like condescending or patronizing.
Oh, okay.
Especially in a professional setting.
So a good hug is like a warm embrace.
Yeah.
Not a pat on the head.
Exactly. It's conveying genuine care and affection without, diminishing the other person.
Okay. There's a lot more to hugging than I ever thought.
There is.
This is great.
And this brings us to a hand gesture I think a lot of people wonder about. Cupping someone's hand during a handshake.
Oh, yes. I've always wondered about that one. What does it mean?
Usually it's a way of conveying warmth and connection, like a hand hug.
I've noticed that some people do this naturally while others are a little more hesitant. Is it a cultural thing or is it just like a personal preference?
It can be a cultural thing.
Okay.
But it can also just come down to, personal preference and how comfortable someone is with physical touch,
Okay. But in general, it's a positive cue.
It is, yeah. It signals that you're happy to meet the person and you're open to building a rapport.
Yeah.
But it's important to be mindful of boundaries, right?
Right.
If it's done too aggressively or lingers too long, it can come across as, creepy or invasive.
Always good to be respectful.
Yeah.
Speaking of space, Van Edwards has an interesting observation about men and how they kind of take up more space.
Yes.
She's noticed that men often stand with their feet apart, hands visible. It's like they're expanding their presence.
Yeah, she suggests that it's like a subconscious way of asserting dominance and signaling confidence.
Oh, wow. It's like they're claiming their territory.
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Our bodies are communicating even when we're not aware of it.
All this talk about body language is making me realize how much I rely on autopilot in my conversations.
Oh, yeah.
I tend to just default to those generic questions like, what do you do? Or how's it going?
I know. It's easy to fall into those patterns, but they rarely lead to, like, engaging or meaningful conversations.
So how do we break out of autopilot?
Van Edwards, she recommends asking, like, better questions.
Better question. Yeah.
Questions that spark curiosity.
Okay.
Invite the other person to share their passions and perspectives.
What kind of questions are we talking about?
So instead of asking, what do you do? Try asking, what are you working on that you're really excited about? Or instead of, how's it going? Try, what's your biggest goal right now?
Oh, I love those. They're so much more engaging.
They are.
Yeah. It's about moving beyond, like, small talk and getting to the heart of what makes someone tick.
That's it. And that's the key to building like genuine rapport.
Yeah.
It's about showing genuine interest in the other person and creating a space where they feel heard and understood.
This is making me think about those friendship dates we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
Do you think these conversation tips apply to building friendships too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they're like even more important when it comes to building friendships.
Because you're trying to build a deeper connection
Exactly.
that goes beyond the surface.
Right. And when you're on those friendship dates, remember to choose activities that, you both enjoy and use those engaging questions that spark, meaningful conversations.
So instead of just meeting for coffee, we might suggest going to a museum,
Yeah,
attending a concert, trying a new activity.
totally. Yeah. It's about creating shared experiences
Yeah.
that give you something to talk about
Connect over.
and connect over. Yeah. And while you're on those friendship dates, remember all those cues we've been discussing?
Right, like pay attention to their body language.
Yes.
Listen attentively.
Yeah.
Ask thoughtful questions.
It's like you're armed with this whole new set of tools for navigating like the social world.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And remember, the goal isn't to become some sort of like social ninja, like manipulating people with my newfound knowledge.
Right.
It's really about understanding and connecting on a deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. It's about becoming more aware of the subtle dance of human interaction.
This reminds me of something Van Edwards said about AirPods.
Oh, yeah.
She seems to think they're contributing to a decline in spontaneous connection.
It's a valid concern. When we're constantly plugged in, we're less likely to strike up those casual conversations with strangers
Right.
that can lead to new friendships or even
Yeah.
unexpected opportunity.
It's like we're putting up a barrier
Yeah.
between ourselves and the world.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
We can be mindful
Yeah.
of our technology use and make sure that it's not like preventing us from connecting with people.
So maybe it's about finding a balance. Use headphones when you need to,
Yeah.
but also make an effort to like unplug
Yes,
and
exactly.
be present.
Be present, yeah.
Okay. I like that.
It's about being intentional, right?
Yeah.
And making sure the technology is serving you
Yeah.
and not disconnecting you.
All this talk about reading cues and understanding people, it makes me think about lie detection again.
Oh, yeah.
Is there really a way to tell if someone is lying just by observing their behavior?
Well, it's tricky,
Yeah.
but there are some subtle clues that can give us a hint. Remember those micro expressions we talked about?
Oh, yeah, those fleeting expressions.
Yeah.
That can reveal true emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one surprising cue that Van Edwards mentions is subtle expressions of disgust.
Disgust. Why would a liar show disgust?
It's not about being disgusted with, like, the other person. It's often directed at themselves. They might, like, sniff or wrinkle their nose as if they're disgusted by their own dishonesty.
Wow. It's like their body is betraying their word.
It is. It highlights the power of, like, nonverbal communication,
Right?
right? Even when we're trying to control our words, our bodies often reveal how we're really feeling.
I'm starting to feel like a human lie detector over here.
Right. But again, the goal isn't to become paranoid or overly analytical.
Okay.
It's to become more attuned to the subtle signals that people are sending
Okay.
through their body language.
Makes sense.
Right. We can help us understand them better and build more authentic connections.
But all this talk about cues and body language can feel a little overwhelming at times. Like, where do I even begin?
I think the best place to start is with authenticity.
There's that word again.
I know.
Be yourself. Be genuine.
Be yourself, yeah.
I get it, but it's easier said than done.
It is. But it's important to remember that we don't have to be perfect, right?
Mhm.
We don't have to know all the cues or master, like, every technique. It's about finding what works for you and using it in a way that feels natural
Right.
and authentic.
Van Edwards talks about the importance of playing to your strengths.
Exactly. What are you good at?
Ah.
Are you a good listener?
Yeah.
Are you a great storyteller? Do you have a knack for making people feel comfortable?
She gives the example of President Truman. He wasn't considered a charismatic speaker,
Right.
but he won the DNC by having those one-on-one conversations where he could connect on a more personal level.
Right.
So it's not about using canned pickup lines or trying to be the life of the party. It's about being comfortable in your own skin
Yes.
and letting your authentic self shine through.
And when we're authentic, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
It allows us to relax and enjoy the interaction, which makes us more approachable and engaging.
We've talked a lot about building connections with new people, but what about strengthening our existing relationships?
Oh, that's so important. In fact, I think it's even more important to be mindful of our cues and communication style in our close relationships.
Because those are the ones that matter most.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we take those relationships for granted,
Yeah.
or we fall into like patterns of communication that aren't serving us.
So how can we use these cues to nurture our friendships and make them stronger?
It starts with paying attention.
Like,
Are we really listening to our friends? Are we sending out cues of warmth and support? Are we making an effort to connect on a deeper level?
so it's about being present, engaged,
It is, yeah.
not just going through the motions.
Yeah. And remember those friendship dates we talked about?
Yeah.
Those can be a great way to reconnect with friends
Okay.
and inject some fun and intentionality into the relationship.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different strategies for using cues to build stronger relationships, but what about those times when you're just not connecting?
Oh yeah, it happens. Not every interaction is going to be a home run, right?
Yeah, so what do we do in those situations? Do we just cut our losses and move on?
Not necessarily. It's important to remember that, we don't have to be best friends with everyone we meet.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to just have a pleasant,
Yeah.
surface level interaction
Mhm.
and leave it at that.
So we don't have to force it.
No, you don't have to force it. And sometimes, even if we're not feeling a strong connection,
Yeah.
we can still practice those basic cues of warmth and respect.
Like making eye contact, smiling,
Exactly.
listening attentively.
Yeah, it's about being polite and respectful, even if we're not feeling this deep connection.
So even if you strike out, it's still good practice.
It is. It's like any skill.
Yeah.
The more we practice, the better we get.
It's fascinating to think about how much of our communication happens on this subconscious level.
It really is.
We're receiving these cues without even realizing it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it's empowering to realize that we can become more conscious of these cues and use them to our advantage.
It's like we're taking control of the language
Yeah,
of connection.
Exactly. That's what makes this so exciting.
It's been so great to dive into Van Edwards' research with you. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. Yeah. It's always fascinating to explore these nuances of human behavior.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious, are there any specific cues or techniques that you found helpful in your own life?
That's a great question. One thing that's really resonated with me is the power of asking engaging questions.
I love that one too. It's such a simple yet effective way to connect.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And I've also found that being mindful of my body language,
Okay.
especially my posture
Yeah.
and hand gestures, that's made a big difference in how I feel.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
It is, yeah. And it's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's about being aware and making these small adjustments
Right,
that can
yeah.
make a huge impact.
I've been so focused on the external cues. I haven't really thought about the internal ones,
Yeah.
our thoughts and feelings. Do those play a role in how we're perceived?
They do. Our internal state definitely influences our external cues, If we're feeling confident and happy,
Yeah.
it's going to show, right?
Yeah.
And if we're feeling anxious or insecure, those feelings are going to leak out as well.
So it's not just about faking it till you make it. You actually have to cultivate a positive internal state.
I think that's a big piece of it, yeah.
Okay.
It's about working on ourselves from the inside out.
So it's a holistic approach. We got to work on our internal state
Yeah.
as well as those external cues.
It's all connected.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It really has.
I feel like I'm already starting to see the world in a whole new light.
That's what I love about, exploring human behavior. There's always something new to discover.
Absolutely. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's take a moment to digest all of this incredible information.
That's a great idea. It's a lot to process.
As we're talking about all these cues, it makes me think about how differently men and women might interpret them. Do you think there's a difference in how we perceive these subtle signals?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's actually some really fascinating research on that.
Okay.
Van Edwards talks about a study where they put people in an MRI machine
Yeah.
and showed them images of different body language cues.
Okay, so what did they find?
Well, the women's brains, lit up like Christmas trees,
Lead.
activating areas associated with empathy, social processing, even memory.
So women are processing all of this on a much deeper level.
Yeah, it seems so. And while men tended to focus on more obvious cues like, broad shoulders or a dominant stance, women were picking up on those subtle nuances in facial
So
expressions.
we're like human lie detectors.
Right. I guess all those years of reading between the lines have paid off.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, though, how our brains are wired differently
Hmm.
and how those differences can influence, like, our social interactions.
This whole conversation about cues and how to use them effectively has me thinking about something I used to be really into. Those pickup artist tactics.
Oh, yeah. You mean those techniques that focused on, like, manipulating people's emotions and using, tricks to get them to like you?
Exactly. Like, I was obsessed with that stuff for a while. I thought it was the key to, winning over women, but
Right.
looking back, it was so cringe.
But you realize now that those tactics rarely work
Yeah.
in the long run.
They don't. They might get you a date, but they won't build a genuine connection.
Right. And that's what I find so refreshing about Van Edwards' approach, right? It's not about tricks or manipulation.
Right.
It's about understanding the science of human connection
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to build, stronger, more meaningful relationships.
It's about being your best self,
It is.
not some like contrived version of who you think you should be.
Exactly. And that's what makes us truly magnetic
Yeah.
and attractive.
Right. This has been such an incredible deep dive into the world of cues. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's always more to learn.
But before we wrap things up, I want to challenge our listeners
Okay.
to put some of this knowledge into practice. Think about one specific cue that really resonated with you today.
Yeah.
It could be anything. It could be flashing your palm, asking more engaging questions,
I'm going on a friendship date.
going on a friendship date.
Yeah.
Commit to experimenting with it this week and notice how it impacts your interactions,
Yeah.
how people respond.
You might be surprised at the difference that, like, even small changes can make.
This has been such a fascinating journey. We hope you've learned some valuable insights and feel inspired to put these strategies into practice.
Absolutely.
Go forth and cue consciously.